It is Wednesday, it's June 4th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Geon-young. Now, Koreans have been heading to the polls all day to cast ballots in local elections. They're seen as a test of how the public feels about the Park Geun-hye administration's handling of April's deadly ferry sinking. Now, roughly 3,900 regional posts are up for grabs in the elections. They are held every 4 years, including 17 very important mayoral and provincial governor jobs that often serve as springboards for future national leaders. Our team is on the ground at different polling booths and rival party headquarters throughout the nation. We will connect with them throughout this special newscast. Now, polling stations around the nation opened at 6 a.m. Korea time, and they will remain open until 6 p.m. So only about 2 more hours are left until the end of the voting hours. As of 3 p.m. on this election day, that's about an hour ago, voter turnout rate for the entire nation stood at roughly 46%. Now, that figure includes the more than 11% of eligible voters who cast their ballots in early voting late last week, and most of the nation's major cities show a voter turnout in the 40% range as of about an hour ago, including right here in Seoul, and where the figure was 46.1%. Stronger voter turnouts were being seen in the administrative city of Sejong, the eastern province of Gangwon-do, and the southwestern Jeollanam-do province, and we will keep you updated on those figures throughout the day. Voters across the nation are busy casting their ballots for the over 3,900 city, mayor district, and provincial governor, councilor, and education chief posts up for grabs. Let's go over to one of the polling stations. Our Song Ji-sun joins us live from Seoul's central Jongno-gu district. Ji-sun, less than 2 hours remain before the polls close. Are we seeing many latecomers rushing to the polling booths?
Good afternoon, Kanyang. I've been seeing younger generations visiting the polling station in the afternoon, whereas the older generations dropped by early in the morning. Now, Seoul's turnout rate has been lagging behind other cities and provinces early in the morning, but the rate now stands higher than the nationwide average at 49.4%, whereas the nationwide average stands at 49%. Those figures are also higher than 4 years ago when the 2010 local elections were held. Now, it's been hard to predict the results, how the races will turn out this time around with the adoption of the early voting period and factoring in the impacts of the Seoul ferry disaster. Now let's take a listen from the voters what they had in mind when selecting the leaders of their regions.
I voted for candidates who can do the job and improve the livelihoods of the people in terms of new jobs and the quality of living.
Unlike my friends who are my age, I wasn't affected that much by the Seoul ferry disaster. My priority in this election was more on security than welfare, and I see more room for growth and development.
Now, one thing here is for sure. The turnout rate of the different age groups is a major factor in these local elections. 4 out of 5 Koreans are eligible to vote this Wednesday, numbering some 41 million people in total. And those in 50s or older account for more than 40% of the total number of voters nationwide, but the case is different here in Seoul. The ratio of those in their 20s and 30s are the highest in the nation at 39.7%, outnumbering those in their 50s and older at 39.6%. Now, these younger generations are usually considered progressive, while the elderly are more conservative, so voting numbers between these two groups will be one of the deciding factors in whether incumbent Mayor Park Geun-hye of the opposition party remains in office, or the ruling Saenuri Party's multi-term lawmaker Chung Mung-jun beats the odds. This has been Song Ji-sun reporting live from Jongno-gu district in Seoul.
All right, let's now go over to Gyeonggi-do province. Now, this is a region on the outskirts of Seoul, and it is getting a lot of attention in this year's elections. And that's not only because of its location and large population, but also for the tight race that is expected there between the ruling and main opposition party. Our Connie Lee is on site. Connie, what is the mood like there right now?
Hey, Kanyang. Well, the mood here has been a mix of determination and eagerness as we've practically seen a non-stop flow of voters coming to this polling station in the city of Suwon. Now, citizens here today are voting for the governor of Gyeonggi-do province, and actually the race between the ruling Saenuri party and the main opposition, New Politics Alliance Democracy, is neck and neck this year and is one of the tightest races in the nation. But aside from that, a lot of the eyes are on Gyeonggi-do province for its regional significance. Now, as a province is right outside of the capital, the politics here and ultimately the outcome of the race here play an influential role in the central government. Gyeonggi-do province is a large area and is the most populated province with almost 10 million eligible voters. Now, as mentioned earlier, the Seoul ferry disaster is expected to affect voter sentiment nationwide. But for citizens here in this province, the tragedy touches closer to home. Tanwon High School, or the school that lost hundreds of students and teachers in April's ferry accident, is in Gyeonggi-do province in the city of Ansan. Now, I talked to two voters here, Kanyang, who said that the ferry disaster definitely affected the way they voted.
There are a lot of issues at stake, but because of the Seoul ferry incident, safety issues are important. When I made my vote, I was more mindful of which party I was voting for, rather than the individual candidate.
What I want from the local elections has changed from what I wanted in the last presidential election. Now I feel like certain parties have too much power, and that the power needs to be more spread out.
So, Connie, the race for governor for Gyeonggi-do province is one of the hottest battlefields. What do we know about the two candidates in this neck-and-neck race?
Right, the two governor hopefuls, ruling Saenuri party candidate Nam Kyung-pil and Kim Jin-pyo, the main opposition party, actually have a lot of similarities. Both of them are from the city of Suwon, and they went to the same high school. And in their political campaigns, both have emphasized safety issues and economic growth. They're also career politicians. Nam is a 5-time lawmaker and Kim a 3-time lawmaker. So, who will be the next governor of Gyeonggi-do province? Well, just a few more hours to go until the results come in. Reporting live from Suwon in Gyeonggi-do province, this has been Connie Lee.
Well, President Park Geun-hye also exercised her right as a Korean national, casting her ballot earlier this morning. At around 9 a.m., the president visited a polling booth nearby the presidential office located in Jongno-gu district. She went through the exact same procedure as any other voter there. Just for one move afterwards, she shook the hands with observers at the polling station. The nationwide elections will be the first of their kind since President Park took office last year, and the outcome will be a barometer of public sentiment towards the current administration. The elections also come just 7 weeks after the Seoul ferry disaster, in which more than 300 people were killed or remain missing. Now, in nearly all elections here in Korea, at least in recent memory, swing voters have played the deciding factor in the fate of the candidates. Today's elections are no exception, and experts say voters in their 40s will most likely hold the key this time to who comes out of the day victorious. Our Na Hyung-kyung has more on these game changers.
It's become an established fact in Korea that those in their 50s and older tend to support the conservatives, while people in their 30s and younger lean toward liberal parties. That usually leaves people in their 40s making up most of the swing votes. Experts say the Park Geun-hye administration's handling of the Seoul ferry disaster has changed today's election dynamics in many ways.
Swing voters who saw Prime Minister nominee An Dae-hee withdraw his nomination due to personal ethical issues felt the government was not trustworthy. If a lot of those voters head to the polls, they will likely sway the election results.
But it's not just the ruling party that's being hurt.
There's bound to be a so-called incumbent advantage because the campaign came to a halt for a few weeks due to the ferry disaster. That made it very difficult for challenging candidates to establish their positions.
As for the roughly 12% of the electorate who came out for last week's two-day early voting, most experts say it's unlikely that this will pump up the turnout.
If people take Thursday off, they can go on a long holiday because Memorial Day falls on Friday. So I think those who participated in the early voting are probably people who were going to vote anyway, but can't because of their schedule, meaning there won't be a drastic increase in the overall voter turnout.
All that remains now is to see how many people head to the polls and for their ballots to be counted. 나현경, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, whatever happens in these elections, the results are going to have a significant impact on Korea's political landscape over the coming months. And as our Park Geun-hye reports, they could also be a good indicator of what to expect in the next presidential race.
The results of the June 4th local elections will significantly change the political landscape of Korea. If the ruling camp wins the election, despite harsh public criticism against the incumbent government following its poor handling of the ferry disaster, the Park Geun-hye administration could gain enough political momentum to steer the state affairs for the rest of her term. The government's ambitious policy goals, which include deregulation reforms and a 3-year plan for economic innovation, may also gain political support. However, if the ruling Saenuri Party loses to opposition camps, not only in its traditionally weak regions, but also in regions where neck-and-neck races are expected, the Conservative Party will be in a turmoil starting from an upcoming party convention scheduled in July. Politicians inside the party who are close to President Park will most likely be held responsible. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy will also face diverging scenarios according to the results of the elections. If it wins the elections, the late March merger of the former main opposition Democratic Party and political icon An Chol-soo's New Political Vision Party will gain the justification it so desperately needs. The co-leadership of Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo will be strengthened in preparing for the next general elections and eventually the next presidential election. But in the case that the main opposition loses in major neck-and-neck race regions, the co-leadership will be significantly hurt, and the fledgling party could face the danger of being embroiled in factional strife. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Well, for the candidates of the nation's two main political parties, this must be a nail-biting time. Let's get a check on the atmosphere at the two campaign headquarters. First, let's go over to our Kim Myung-gil. He is at the ruling Saenuri Party headquarters. Myung-gil, has the ambience changed since we last checked in with you?
Well, not exactly. As you can see, only the media are currently present here at the Saenuri Party headquarters. Candidates and the ruling party leaders will be arriving here around just in about 2 hours' time when voting in the local election ends. In front of the Situation Room here, the 17 pictures of Saenuri Party candidates for the mayoral and provincial governor posts are displayed. And there's also a bulletin with the names of all the Saenuri Party candidates for local council members, county heads, ward members, and education superintendents. Beside the names are blank boxes. These will later be used to indicate whether they won today's elections or lost.
Well, I'm sure the leadership there will want more boxes checked than left blank. Now, as we have been reporting, Myung-gil, the April Seoul ferry disaster has had an impact on voter sentiment. Leaders of the ruling Saenuri Party have been asking the public to support their candidates and really give President Park Geun-hye a chance to make things right, make this nation right. What kind of indicators should we be paying attention to this afternoon and evening?
Well, Kanyang, the voter turnout among the younger generation could be the key. Some analysts say the younger people and the more liberal voters will turn up en masse to cast judgment upon the government and the ruling Saenuri Party. As you just said, the ruling party candidates and its leaders have been asking voters to support President Park Geun-hye so she can successfully work through her term. The election results may shape the remaining 3 years and 9 months of the Park administration. The Saenuri Party currently has an upper strong hand in the traditional conservative strongholds of the southeastern regions, and tight races are expected in the capital regions. The Saenuri Party is especially paying close attention to what happens in Korea's central regions, as they're known to swing in favor of both major parties. This was Kim Young-gil reporting live from Saenuri Party headquarters in Seoul.
Let's now go over to its rival party headquarters, our Kwon So-ah, who is at the National Assembly, and that is where the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is keeping a close eye on today's election results. So what's it like there?
Kanyang, here at the National Assembly, Parliament, the members' building here, where the New Politics Alliance for Democracy Situation Room is, it is not as quiet as it was around 2 hours ago, as the room is filling up with more and more media. And around an hour ago, floor leader Park Geun-hye held a short speech here, asking that people cast their precious votes, as the voter turnout was at around 45% at that time when she spoke. Now, prior to that, representatives of the party's election commission held a meeting, and I heard them saying they were concerned about earlier opinion polls having a negative effect on the results. Now, NPAD members are expected to arrive before the first exit polls come out after voting ends at 6 p.m. The members will take their seats in front of 10 monitors that are set up on stage.
So I always wonder, when the candidates themselves cast their ballots, who they vote for, probably themselves, but they have been casting their ballots as well, right?
Right. Although with the early voting system implemented for the first time in local elections, most NPAD members actually already voted on Friday and Saturday, and that includes NPAD co-leader An Chol-soo as well as incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon. But co-leader Kim Han-gil voted with his wife at a polling station in Seoul's Gwangjang-dong this morning, where he told reporters that while the world does not change on its own, voting can spur change.
Now, analysts say that these elections are going to go down to the wire. What is the New Politics Alliance for Democracy expecting?
Just like the ruling Saenuri Party, the NPAD says there's no telling of how the results will turn out, as there are 10 to 11 swing regions. But the NPAD is expecting its candidates to win this whole mayoral race, as well as races in their traditional strongholds of Jeollabuk-do and Jeollanam-do in the southwest of the country. Now, that's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast here at the NPAD's Situation Room.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young, every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Now, the poll results expected late tonight won't lead to a structural change in the central government or even the National Assembly legislature, but that doesn't mean they won't hold special meeting for the Park administration, which of course is facing its biggest political crisis since coming into power early last year. Let's take a closer look at the significance of today's elections, the implications, and what we can expect after all of the votes have been counted. Joining us live via Skype is Dr. Robert E. Kelly. He is a professor of political science at Busan National University. Professor Kelly, it's good to see you again.
Hi, thank you for having me again.
Now, we have presidential, parliamentary, and local elections here in Korea, so it's, I would presume, probably safe to say that the general public isn't as interested in the local elections as the first two. However, I'm feeling that the mood is definitely different this time around. Why don't you please go over why that is the case?
Sure. Well, local elections like this generally see lower turnout. That means fewer people turn out and show up to vote. You see this phenomenon actually in a lot of Western democracies as well. In the United States, for example, in the years between presidential elections, they have congressional elections and very few people show up when the president runs. However, it stokes a lot of interest and people come out to vote. And that's probably what's going to happen today. These are local elections. They're simply not as important as the big national ones, and so fewer people will come out to vote. So that's that's what one structural issue. In the background, though, of course, is the Sewol incident, which has galvanized a huge sort of national outpouring of sort of grief and concern about the country's direction and the rest of it. This was very unprecedented, and nobody really expected this at all, of course. And so people expect that this will actually drive a high turnout, particularly among younger voters, people who didn't vote for Park Geun-hye in the past, and they may take advantage of the local election here to register a protest movement.
Right, so definitely this will be a barometer of how the public feels about the administration. Now, what about a voter turnout? You briefly touched upon that, but how will that factor into the final results? I mean, the figure, according to the National Commission, right now it stands at or stood at 49.1% as of 4 p.m. Korea time. That's roughly 2 hours before the polls close at 6 p.m. And that includes the more than 11% turnout in early voting. Now, how do you think this will play out? What does this mean, this voter turnout rate?
Sure. Well, traditionally, the social science on Korean elections says that higher turnout means that the vote swings more to the left. Korea's older voters, who are more conservative, people who are over the age of 50, they also vote a lot, particularly pensioners and elderly. They have more time, they have flexibility and stuff like that. Working families have a harder time getting off and going to vote and stuff like that. So older people vote more. In Korea, that means that you have a strong conservative base. So if you drive up the turnout, though, right, if you push turnout to 75 or 80%, then you're getting more and more younger voters. Korean voters, younger voters are very much on the left. They strongly voted against Park Geun-hye 2 years ago. So the working assumption is if more people show up to vote, that should push the vote to the left. But this is what people predicted. The only sort of hang up here is that this is what people predicted in 2012. They said, if there's a strong vote, it's going to swing the election, and it actually did not. Park Geun-hye managed to win by a couple percentage points, even though turnout was, if I remember, it was like over 75%, which was very high. So for the left to do well today would require a lot of people to show up, and so far, as you said, the turnout's only around 50%. So it's looking like to be a better day for the right than people had expected, especially given Sewol. The right's doing better than we thought.
Right. I mean, like you said, the surveys conducted in late May indicated that strong public criticism of President Park, mostly led by liberal younger Koreans, has likely pushed voters who typically make up President Park's base, older conservative people, like you said, to respond by rallying behind ruling party candidates. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, the larger structural issue is that it tells me that Korea is actually becoming something of a polarized society. Right, that you have a really deep generational split. And I think we saw this in 2012 also, when everybody said basically if under 40-year-old Koreans come out to vote, Park is going to lose. If they don't, she's going to win. That's actually sort of a longer term issue, right, is how do you sort of seal that structural rift? And that rift has just been aggravated by the Sewol incident. As you said, Sewol sort of activated first a sort of younger coalition of Korean voters, people who came out and said President Park should resign, and they marched in the Blue House, and they had the candlelight vigils and stuff like that. And then that provoked a backlash, which I think no one really anticipated, where, like you just said, sort of Korean older voters came out saying, no, we have to sort of come back and support the president and stuff like that. So I think if I had to guess, Sewol will probably move the needle 5 to 10 percentage points today. That will help the left in some of the closer races, but it's not going to be the landslide that maybe people thought 2 or 3 weeks ago.
All right, let's move on to what happens after the elections. What kind of changes do we expect in the country's political landscape after the final results are out?
Sure. I think the most important thing nationally is that this will be understood as a referendum on President Park's presidency to date. She's been in there now for, I think, 16 months. And this is the first chance Korean voters have had since she was elected to actually go and register their opinions. We know that smaller elections like this are often used as a protest vote. They're often used as a vehicle for the voters to express their discontent with things like that, things coming from the national level. We saw this at the European Parliament elections 2 weeks ago, where there was really sort of like a burst of sort of like right-wing anger, but people didn't really want to elect Nazis to the European Parliament. What they really wanted to do was register a protest vote with their governments. And I think that's what we need to see here, right? Is there like a big sort of explosion from below over Sewol or not? And I think, a couple weeks ago on this program, you and I discussed this. We really expected this, and it's actually not turning out to be the case. Like you said, the voter turnout is lower, I think, than people expected. And so if Sae-no-ri comes through this tonight pretty well, I don't think you're going to see a big course change from the Park administration in the next year and a half. I think the left was really counting on like a big wave today to really push President Park to sort of throw her presidency into trouble, and that's not really turning out to be the case. At least it doesn't look like it.
Well, the final results we will find out in less than 2 hours' time, so we look forward to that. All right, Robert E. Kelly, professor at Busan National University, thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, as for the weather conditions, let's go over to our Michelle Park. Michelle, how is the weather looking for people who are still planning to go out to the polling booth?
Well, after 2 days of rain, it's generally cloudy today with temperatures mostly up into the high 20s, but nothing that could hinder people as they head out to vote here in the central region. However, fairly heavy rain is forecast to continue until tomorrow in the southern regions, so make sure to take an umbrella on your way out. Now, and as it's election day, here is a fun piece of information. According to one meteorological psychologist, voter turnout decreases 15% on rainy days and drops 5% on when the higher temperatures than the average seasonal temperatures. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 29 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 27 and 21 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 23, Dokdo also at 23, while Mangkeong tops out at 13. Well, that's all for now. Michelle Park, and back to you, Ganyang.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. And that's all for now. I'll be back with more of ARIRANG News special coverage of the local elections a bit earlier than usual, 1 minute before 6 p.m. Korea time. See you then.